And by the way, just finishing on this, did you see where Opposition Leader Peter Dutton was today? And more importantly, with whom? He was in Alice Springs looking at the social disaster there, and he was with Senator Jacinta Price. And they were calling on the Prime Minister to stop fiddling around with the voice and fix what's actually rotten on the ground right now.
What's here at the moment isn't working. People are leaving this town in droves, and the Prime Minister needs to spend more time than just jumping off the jet, spending an hour or two here and then jumping on the jet and going back to Canberra.
Now, why is this significant, apart from the fact that most of the people pushing the voice don't want to know about the troubles in Alice Springs too hard? It's because yesterday Peter Dutton lost his spokesman for the voice, Julian Leeser, who quit because he's actually for the voice that his own party is against. So Dutton now needs a new spokesman. Someone who, unlike Julian Leeser, is against the voice and against it on principle. Someone who is articulate. In fact, someone I interviewed last night. I am certain that your inbox is filled with messages saying, Jacinta, go for the job. Now, it's not for you to point yourself, but are you up for it? The real question is, are the Liberals up for Jacinta Price? Please let them know that you are, at least. But joining me is National Senator Matt Canavan, the former Resources Minister. Matt Canavan, always great to talk to you. I want to get on to a couple of different topics, but let me first ask you, Jacinta Price is the opposition's spokesman on the voice, replacing Julian Leeser. Good idea?
It's a great idea, Andrew. She is one of the most articulate voices in the nation's parliament, and not just on Indigenous issues or the voice. I don't think she should be pigeonholed. She's an extremely well-rounded, well-thought-through, experienced grassroots politician. Before she was a senator, she was a deputy mayor there at Alice Springs, where Peter is today. She knows the issues on the ground and can communicate them to the Australian people in simple language. So I'd love to see her elevated. I think it will happen at some point. I'm not sure if it will happen just now, but she's a great asset to the coalition, and I think the whole nation should be proud of this Aboriginal woman who's shining on the national stage.
Oh, and that then makes me go for my double ticket. The other one, of course, is Matt Canavan for Resources Minister. But anyway, that's for another day. To news
that's not going to happen. I'll break that to you. That won't happen.
Well, that just shows one more explanation why the opposition's in such chaos. But anyway, leave that to one side. To news that hasn't got that much publicity, although I do think Joe Aston wrote an excellent column about this week. Last year, billionaire Andrew Forrests, the global warming crusader, huge investor, said it's signed a deal with Apple, which would buy most of the electricity from a $1 billion wind farm that Forrests is creating in this bushland in North Queensland. But now Apple has pulled out because the planned wind farm apparently looks like an animal killer. For one, it's going to destroy koala habitat. Matt, what does this episode tell you?
Well, it reveals the myth that is at the heart of the so-called energy transition, Andrew, and that is that green energy is not green. Green energy is the most environmentally destructive form of energy production because it requires the use of so much of the environment. The reason the world moved to fuels like coal and then oil, gas, and ultimately nuclear was because they all had a lower footprint on the world's planet. And while they weren't necessarily raving greenies back in the 19th century, they needed to use that land for other purposes like growing food or building towns. And so they moved naturally to resources that did have a lower impact on the environment. But because we remain naively and ignorantly obsessed with one environmental issue, that is carbon dioxide emissions, we are at the moment completely ignoring all the other environmental issues like koalas need a place to live, like migratory bird species don't particularly like getting hit by large steel turning blades. These are massive environmental issues, and I was just talking to a local community yesterday here in Rockhampton, and they were telling me how these mountain ranges just west of Rockhampton are being totally levelled. They've got to have a pad of 200 metres by 200 metres to put the wind turbines on, which go up another 275 metres. And that means, of course, they've got to take off the whole tops of these mountainscapes that are completely pristine, haven't been touched, at all. This is an environmental outrage that is building across Australia, and I just hope people in the cities do get out and speak about what is actually happening in the bush, because you might feel warm and fuzzy getting your power from wind and solar, but you should actually look at where it's actually coming from and how it's built.
I must say that poor Andrew Forrests is having a bit of bad luck, Matt. I mean, West Australia's State Administrative Tribunal has just banned an irrigation project of his in a Pilbara River that it said was sacred to the traditional owners. Now, I was fascinated about the reason the tribunal gave. It said, you know, from the traditional owner's perspective, this project, which will affect the natural flow of the river, risks killing or harming this sacred water snake or causing the water snake to become angry, and that would have a significant adverse impact on the locals. I just wonder, is a superstition now a good reason to ban a project like this?
Well, I don't know much about superstition, Andrew, but I am very, very interested to know how they understood or could understand the fact that a snake could become angry. I think that alone, before we get into the planning and environmental assessment of this particular project, this is a major scientific breakthrough that somehow these assessors can conclude about the emotions of different animal species. But what always strikes me about these type of comparisons is somehow the feelings, if you like, if I use their terms here, the feelings of the animals are sacrosanct, but the impact on human beings, another important species, I think, are completely ignored. I mean, when these sort of projects get stopped or the development doesn't happen, there is also, of course, an impact on humans, and some of them get pretty angry too, but I don't think their views get assessed much or factored into these types of assessments.
A very good cross analogy there, very good. But I don't know, maybe they did call the sacred snake to the witness box to give evidence. I don't know, maybe they did that.
No.
Matt, I was struck by some of the reporting of this supposed trade breakthrough with China that the Foreign Minister announced yesterday, the alleged start of China winding back its trade bans on us, starting just for the moment with barley. Here's Penny Wong, the Foreign Minister.
China has agreed to undertake an expedited review of the duties imposed on Australian barley over a 3-month period, which may extend to a fourth if required. In return, we have agreed to temporarily suspend the World Trade Organisation dispute.
Matt, this seems to me a little bit like Australia blinking. You know, we're suspending taking legal action that we're entitled to do, while China just promises to have a look at the illegal ban over the next 3-4 months.
Yeah, it's all a bit of a pantomime, I think, Andrew. The truth is the WTO legal action was never going to go anywhere because at the moment the appeals process is completely constipated within the WTO, and that's because the American government, ironically, won't appoint any judges to the panel. So it won't actually lead to anything apart from potential embarrassment for China, which they probably don't care about. At the same time, I've said for years here, I think we need to get tougher here. I think we play footsie on these issues. China is clearly illegally acting under its obligations in the WTO, not just on these actions they're taking against Australia. They're massively subsidising their own steel industry, for example. They now produce 60% of the world's steel. Why don't we get serious and put tariffs on Chinese steel so we can make more steel here in Australia? Again, we have the iron ore, we've got the coking coal, but we now import 50% of our steel needs, mainly from China because of their illegal subsidies. We should get serious about that sort of action because this just seems to be going through the motions, and I don't think China will lift its ban on Australian barley until it's in the interests of China. It won't think too much about what we care about.
I'm going to be talking about something very spooky involving China, but after the break, Matt Canavan, thank you so much for your time.